In 1977, a government clerk was digging through a financial records building, pay stubs, invoices, boring stuff, when he found 20,000 documents that were never supposed to exist. They described a secret CIA program, 20 years long, 80 institutions, human experiments on people who never agreed to anything. Every other copy of those files had been deliberately destroyed 4 years earlier, on a direct order from the director of the CIA. These survived for one reason. Somebody filed them in the wrong room. That's it. That's the only reason you're allowed to know what I'm about to tell you. To understand how the US government ended up secretly drugging its own citizens, you have to understand how scared they were. It's the early 1950s. American prisoners of war are coming home from Korea, and something is wrong with them. They'd confessed on camera to war crimes that never happened. Some praised their captors. A handful refused to come home at all. Washington looked at this and reached a terrifying conclusion. The enemy has figured out how to reprogram a human mind. Spoiler: they hadn't. It was mostly sleep deprivation, isolation, and pressure. Brutal, but not magic. But the CIA didn't know that yet. And instead of waiting to find out, they made a decision that tells you everything about how institutions think. If mind control is possible, we can't afford to be second. In April 1953, the agency quietly approved a new program. Its budget was allowed to skip normal financial controls. Its files were kept out of the main record system from day one. They called it MKultra. Here's what researching mind control actually looked like in practice. The CIA became convinced the answer was chemical, specifically LSD, a drug so new that almost nobody outside a lab had heard of it. They wanted to know, could you dissolve someone's free will and rebuild it? So they tested it. Not on volunteers, on people, patients in psychiatric hospitals, inmates who were told it was medicine. In one Kentucky facility, subjects were kept on LSD for weeks straight. And then there's the operation that sounds fake every single time I say it out loud. The CIA rented apartments in San Francisco and New York, hired sex workers to bring men back to them, and dosed the men's drinks, while agents watched through two-way mirrors and took notes. This was a real, funded, documented government operation, and its actual code name was Midnight Climax. Your tax dollars, behind a mirror, taking notes. Nobody was ever told. Nobody was ever compensated. For years, nobody even knew. And then the program ate one of its own. In 1953, a U.S. Army scientist named Frank Olson attended a work retreat where his after-dinner drink was spiked with LSD by his own colleagues. As a test. Frank didn't take it well. He spiraled for days. The CIA sent him to New York, supposedly to see a doctor. 9 days after the dose, Frank Olson went out a 10th-floor hotel window. The official story was suicide. His family spent decades fighting it. When his body was finally exhumed in 1994, a forensic team found a skull injury that suggested he may have been struck before the fall. In 1975, the U.S. government formally apologized to the Olson family and paid a settlement. What exactly happened in that hotel room has never been resolved. Here's where you might be thinking, okay, one rogue program, dark chapter, they got caught, the end. No. MKultra had siblings. The program the internet calls Operation Mockingbird. For decades, the CIA cultivated relationships with working journalists at real American news outlets. When the Church Committee, a Senate investigation, dug into it in 1975, they found roughly 50 journalists with direct covert relationships with the agency. Reporting at the time suggested the real number was in the hundreds. Wire services, newspapers, television networks. The logic is almost beautiful in a horrifying way. Brainwashing one person is hard, but if you shape what everyone reads, you never have to brainwash anyone. People will do it to themselves. Operation Sea Spray. In 1950, the Navy wanted to know how a biological attack on an American city would spread, so they simulated one on an actual American city. For about a week, a ship off the coast of San Francisco sprayed clouds of bacteria over the entire city, a species the military believed was harmless to humans. Nearly 1 million people breathed it in. Nobody was asked. Nobody was told. Shortly after, a hospital in the city saw a cluster of infections from that exact bacteria. Infections so rare, the doctors wrote a paper about it because they'd essentially never seen it before. One patient, a man named Edward Nevin, died. His family found out the truth 27 years later, when the tests were declassified. They sued. They lost. The government's position boiled down to, we're allowed to do that. And these are just the programs we know about, the ones where the paperwork survived. Remember the filing error from the beginning? Sit with that for a second. The only reason MKultra is history instead of rumor is clerical luck. Which raises a fun question you'll never fully shake. What got filed in the right room? Okay. Deep breath. That was all decades ago. Different era. Cold War panic. Surely we've moved past it. Here's the uncomfortable part. The experiments never stopped. They just changed buildings. In 2014, Facebook quietly ran an experiment on almost 700,000 users. Researchers tweaked people's news feeds, showing some users more negative posts, others more positive ones, to see if they could steer human emotions at scale. They could. People shown sadder feeds wrote sadder posts. It's called emotional contagion, and it worked. Nobody was asked. Nobody was told. When it became public, the justification was that everyone had technically agreed. It was somewhere in the terms of service. The CIA needed a safe house, a bartender, and a two-way mirror to run an experiment on one person. Facebook needed a code change to run 1 on 700,000. Then 2018, Cambridge Analytica. A political consulting firm got its hands on data from tens of millions of Facebook profiles and used it to build psychological profiles of individual voters. Not demographics, personalities. Whether you were anxious, impulsive, what you were afraid of. Then they served each personality type custom-built political messaging engineered to press that person's specific buttons. Your neighbor saw a different reality than you did, and neither of you knew it. Now, researchers still argue about how well this actually worked. Whether it swung votes is genuinely debated. But the harvesting happened, the profiles were built, and the targeting was deployed. The intent isn't in question, just the batting average. There's a word for figuring out what makes a specific mind bend, and then bending it without the person noticing. It's the thing. The CIA spent 20 years and millions of dollars failing to do with chemicals. Turns out, you don't need the chemicals. You just need the data. Here's the through line across 70 years, from the safe house to your phone. The question never changed. Can you move a human mind without its permission? MKultra asked it with drugs. Mockingbird asked it with headlines. Sea Spray asked it with a literal cloud. Facebook asked it with a news feed. Cambridge Analytica asked it with your own psychology, reflected back at you as an ad. The answer, every single time, was yes. A little. No puppet strings. No total control, just a nudge, a thumb on the scale. But here's what 70 years of this actually proves. Nobody ever needed to control your mind. They just needed to control what reaches it. So, no, I'm not telling you to throw your phone in a lake and move to the woods. That's not the takeaway. The takeaway is that every one of these programs, from 1953 to 2018, depended on the exact same ingredient to work, you not knowing about it. MKultra only worked in the dark. Mockingbird only worked if you trusted the byline. The feed experiments only work if you think your feed just happens. Which means the fix has been the same for 70 years too. It's the thing you just did for the last 9 minutes. You can't run a psyop on someone who knows what one looks like. All right, comments. Which one broke your brain the most? The wrong filing cabinet? Midnight climax? The bacteria cloud? I genuinely want to know, because mine is still the filing cabinet. Subscribe if you want more of this. Next week's video is lighter. Slightly.